Anyway, I wanted to make it kind of clear my stance on some stuff um, about things that have changed here, and it's been around for a while, but I just wanted to throw it out there. So, um, we're talking about this Archon add-on. Um, that is an extension of the um, Warcraft login, logging information, and basically it's an in-game add-on, um, an extension of that to make the information more freely and more accessible. Um, I think from a technical point of view, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, from a player point of view, it makes a lot of sense as well too. Um, so instead of having a lot of traffic, and to describe the technical first, instead of getting people to go to the website all the time and just leaving it up all the time, that may make like server issues and things, being able to get accessibility and things like that. That might actually free them up a little bit, and so it's a good thing. I could see where this can come along, because they're going to hit on an API, and it's just going to hit in game. So the in-game API is going to tick all the time. It's going to grab all the information from there. It's going to then put it into your WoW UI. Um, so instead of we having to actually manually go and look it up, it's right there. So it's super convenient. Okay. So that's enough from the technical side of things. Um, that's why it would be good from a an IT point of view. So, but in reality, um, the average player doesn't care about that too much. You know, the average player um, just really wants to play the game at whatever level they want to play it at, and that's fine. Okay, where everybody has a critique on this and their own opinion on is, will this hurt the game environment? And that's a two-part answer. There's pros and cons to this. We saw this back in Wrath of the Lich King, 15 years ago or so, when they first came out with item level, okay, in tiers of items and gear, and and we and then we started seeing that eye level people with higher eye level would get um, selected and um, and then brought to groups based on that eye level alone, just based on that. Now, I don't think anybody here actually thinks, but when we look at eye level, and obviously WoW just implemented this into the game. They just put it straight back into the UI, saying that this is free information for everybody and publicly used. And I think that's a good thing, because what was happening is the same thing that's happening with the Archon part of it. Is it was just being used so much, and that we went ahead and um, we just we just went ahead and integrated it into the UI system because everybody was using it anyway. So that website's getting all this traffic, things like this, and so then it's just implemented the game. We don't care anymore. So, but even with eye level alone, these statistics that are going to pump through Archon, and to give you a sense of what Archon is doing, before I get into this, is what it's doing is it's taking the Warcraft logs and your parses on previous bosses, um, to where you're where you can see somebody's performance on an individual level. If they've played a lot, basically, there's a threshold. They have to breach that threshold. Once they do that, their data becomes available, which is fine, which is good. Which I think is the main takeaway here on this. So a lot of people, just like eye level, they're going to um, they're going to use it at face value, and that's not the way it's intended to be. So like even now, if you see somebody with eight, not eight, but maybe just a higher eye level in general, what's happening now is people are just switching the gear out after they get into the group. So you see a 658, and then they're really 652, okay? And they did it just to get the Q. That's it. That's all they did, was they just put in this gear there and swapped it right back. And it's because the reason why they swapped it back, because they actually do more DPS, or they can actually play the game, with the gear they have. It's just everyone is so nitpicky on IO. Not just IO, but gear score. And so we're here. We're at this bottleneck now that we can see. We can see all the data now if you play a lot, which I think this is the main positive out of this Archon thing. It's not that I can see if you purple parsed or orange parsed or blue parsed or the type of player you are, okay? Because we all know that is only a portion, a small portion of the reality of what that is. I think the biggest thing that we get out of this is, have you cleared 20 heroic bosses? Have you played enough in this patch to even hit that threshold? And if you haven't, then these people that have, you aren't in that category. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not a good player. It doesn't mean that you have it doesn't mean that you're bringing less to the table necessarily. But in fact, what you are bringing less of is experience, okay? Overall. Now in the first week, these data points don't mean anything, okay? It's brand new content, everything. I don't think in the first couple weeks you probably won't see much of this. However, when you get into the mid range to the end, is like I want to see people fix their stuff, And if you're green parsing and it's week 13, why are you green parsing and it's week 13? Now, if you're on an alt with bad gear, things like that, or a group, you have an explanation for that. Now, this is where we get into this is, would you bring somebody like that to a raid at week 13? And the answer is yes, if it doesn't mean anything. If I'm trying to clear this as quickly as possible, you're not coming to that. You're not getting picked. You just aren't. Okay. But I'm forming this raid with the intention to clear this as fast as possible without any issues. Now, if I'm just having fun, chilling out, and going, just doing like a casual run, sure, you can come. This might be an alt. It might not be. So, but if it's a main, we'll assume that it's a main for this argument. Is there's tiers. There's people that play a lot, and there's people that don't play that much. Okay, and whether that's because of work, whatever the issue is in real life that has you not being able to log into the game for a week or 2 weeks, maybe you had, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you had going on, okay? But you weren't able to log in to put in the work. So why should your inability to play this game more frequently, this is the argument, is should that be a hindrance to you joining groups of other people that have put in that amount of time? Now, we see this in a lot of other games, okay? And this is a very it's actually what a lot of what they would say this is toxic, they would, but really all it is you don't have enough time to play this game. It's really what it comes down to. That's really what this comes down to, okay? Is you're trying to play, maybe you have an hour or 2 hours a week to play. Okay, that's essentially 2 or 3 dungeons, Mythic Plus dungeons, 2 or 3, maybe more. It depends on how fast you get through them. But with your limited experience, you see where this is going. With the limited experience, and assuming those don't go well, or you're being carried because you don't have the gear that you would need or even want to have because you haven't put in the time to do that, we're at this bottleneck of why should a group be basically forced to carry someone that hasn't put in the time and the work. At the time of this, max eye level is about 667, if you can get to it or close to it. If you've been playing, for weekly, why is it anyone else's obligation to? Why is it anyone's obligation to carry you through M plus? Now it's one thing if you're with a guild group and they understand and half the guild is doing it, but we're not talking about these groups. We're not talking about I know a guy and we know he's under geared, but he performs, and we know once he gets gear he'll be a purple purser, and he'll be blue until he gets that. There's a lot of people like that, and those groups are fine, and that's what the guild system is for, is to bring up your buddy, bring up their alt, knowing that I'm going to have to work a little bit harder to get this guy gear so we can run whatever content we want at a high level, for whatever reason it is. But we're not talking about that. Okay, we're talking about a pug situation. Why are those other 4 people responsible for carrying that one person that didn't put the work in for the last, we'll say 6 weeks? For 6 weeks they only put 2 hours in. They're 10 item level below everyone else. So we're 667 right now, and they're 660. Okay, or 659 or 58, doesn't matter. Okay, but the point is they're significantly they don't have crest to do it, which is part of the problem. So they don't have the resources or the people around them, because that's why they're pugging. But they also are pugging because they don't have the time for a guild. So it's like this problem that just snowballs to come down to you don't have enough time to play this game, kind of thing. So and that's where we're at. What is a reasonable amount of time put in this video game? We have to ask ourselves that too, which I do believe that it's a fun thing and it's worth putting time into. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy it a lot. I think we're at a point though that groups need to have a objective way, without being in a guild, without being in a social competitive environment, okay, to easily reflect on who plays this game more than others. Because I think one thing is going to be clear for the most part is, unless you're at the very, very top end of this stuff, if you're a seasonal Simon as Max and the Potty C cast with Drachnos and what's his face? But Max and Drachnos, and they, they kind of hit this on the head, with the seasonal people, is they get in there, they get it done, they're off to the next thing. That's fine. But these people are existential at their job. They're very, very good at what they do. They're race world first people, but they're there for the race. They might play a little bit after, but after that they're done. They don't need it, And and maybe they play for the next couple of weeks and then they're on to the next thing. That's fine. Seasonal Simons, that's what they're called. Oh, Dorky, that's his name. So anyway, shout out to Dorky too. So we we need some objective way to say that you've played, you know, this. Maybe we just need to say time played this patch. Maybe, time played on this character. Maybe those stats need to be relevant on, on a Raider IO or an Archon. Because, along with this, because reading between the lines, this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that this is more of a, I've spent 60 hours on this character this patch. This person spent 15 hours on this patch and expects the 60 hour people to then carry the 15-hour people. That ain't right. That's just not right. Like, but the problem is the same problem occurs when you get a you get into the social situation. They're not playing because they don't have time. They're not in a guild because they don't have time. They're pugging because they don't have time. And so it gets down to this: is you don't have time, kind of thing. But you still want to play. That's cool. So what I'm really saying is that there needs to be a differential to be able to get into content. There needs to be some level of commitment. That without X, Y, and Z, you cannot be in this. Just like Mythic kind of thing. Now, gear score is nice. Like, we can't have this fluctuation thing. Like, we can't have this just on merit. Well, not merit, because it's not on merit. Because we're actually, it's not a merit based system. Because at this current system, you can bring an undergeared person to it, and that's the point. The point is to be able to bring those undergeared people to get geared. And I get that from a guild situation. Okay. So I guess, how do we fix that problem? How do we fix the problem of person that has put 15 hours in, person that has put 60 hours in? How can we distinguish that? And how do we get those people together? And so all the 15-hour groups, people, or with a certain range, how can those people play together versus the only people that have 60 hours, right? And so I think we get into a controversy here, a real controversy. And I think it's going to be, with eye level was the start of this controversy. Okay. And because eye level is just like a face value look of how much work you put in the end of the day, eye level is nothing more than a face value objectively look of how much time you've put into this game. Okay. And your amount of luck of getting certain items. Okay. To the point people will fake their eye level to get into queues. Okay. We don't want that. I don't think any person wants that, so what that does is that creates bad outcomes. Okay. Because, and it's not just, it goes beyond, timing keys. So you want to you put all these problems together, you're putting a recipe to be a toxic environment, as they would call it, or you're going to cause conflict, because one, you feel lied to, because now you get lied to on the front that we're trying to run a 7 or something like that, and this guy comes in with, and he's might have run 7s, or 6s, to get the gear. He puts the gear on, but he's really only geared for maybe a 5. And it's not that he couldn't, but he's only put in, 15 hours, to where these other people have put in 60. Will they be able to get through it? I think most of the time, I think that it goes unnoticed. Okay. Especially, but I think there are times, especially in the midweeks between, it basically, that behavior is expected the first 2 weeks. I think that behavior, the first week especially, the first 2 weeks, it kind of drifts off. But then you get into weeks 3 to 6 or 3 to 7, and you just have this monstrous amount of people that are just running keys to run them for completion because they don't have anything else, or they're trying to bring it all through, that's early, and they end up breaking a key. So, I don't necessarily know how to, deal with this situation. So we're at this. So, um, going back to just the Raider IO score. Raider IO score was supposed to do this. It's supposed to give you kind of an objective way of looking at things, and just kind of make these decisions on the fly because well, it probably won't matter, and it doesn't. But when it does matter like that, like say it's like a 10 on week 2, that matters because you get a vault slot, or week 3. But even if you're running an alt through, getting a 10 in completion is nice. But if you know that everybody's sandbagging and they only have certain amount of hours on a character, that information would be nice because they wouldn't even, instead of getting the bad experience out of it, they would just not get the experience at all. So what we're doing is we're setting people up for groups up for failure. And so we're setting them up for a bad experience. And I don't like that. I don't particularly enjoy setting people up for bad experiences. But at the same time, is like how do you promote a system to which we can do that effectively? And that's where I think Archon is taking that next level, to where we take Raider IO score and eye level, and I think we are pushing the envelope on how much information do we need to be able to get these groups to be very, very successful, to where we get positive outcomes. So, and we all know that parses are not like the be all end all thing, especially in tanking, especially in healing. Parses are not, the thing. You can have a really good group that doesn't take extra damage and the healer won't parse. Again, it takes damage for healers to parse. It just does. So, it takes people not using, global cooldowns basically, and doing that for them to parse and do things. So I think we've all discussed this. I think other people have discussed that further, and I think that's quite apparent where we're at. But my big question is how do we fix it? How do we get into this? So yes, Island Pass go. That's exactly. We play Magic. That's what we do. But that's essentially what's happening here. Is they're essentially saying that I have to carry this person or not play the game. And in that's a great reason to be in a guild. It really is, especially of a similar skill group. Okay. That's a really good reason to be in a guild. But when people don't, we're also evaluating this from a time investment. Somebody that puts 60 hours of time into it versus 15 hours of time. I bet most cases, unless they're, a seasonal SNAM, rating at the top levels, and they do this all the time, and they rate at the top level and then go do something else and then come back to the game. So we know those people. Those people do the race the world first, but they're here for that, and that's all they want out of the game, and then they go do something else. But we're putting this other element into it, this other variable of time pass. And so the question is and this is directly to Blizzard, is how do we achieve that? What information do we actually need to for players like me to be objective and to be able to that goes past just class and the meta, because you add the meta stuff into this and it gets, you know, a whole different story. But let's face it, a person with 5 hours on a class they've never played before or the first time season, I will take the least meta class out there if they have 60 hours on it versus a meta class that's only had 5 hours or 10 hours on it. Like, I think any seasoned um truthful player, you know, that is trying raid leader, we'll just call him raid leader. Any leader or group leader that wants that would take that every day. Like a good Fural Druid, you know, something niche, even if they're not meta. You know, we're going to take the person, the niche, you know, the person that has that much time in this invested because they're invested. Why wouldn't you take it? Versus, you know, meta, you know, the meta guy over here that only has, you know, 5 hours of playtime, but he's meta. He's meta. He's what we need. No, 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 no. That's not. So I think this is a great opportunity for Blizzard and everyone else to discuss what information do we want as a player base and as leaders to be able to form these groups, because let's face it, there's only a certain amount of groups. I mean, anything at the top end right now, they're already doing this, whether we like it or not. They're doing this and they're going to pick the meta, but most of those people have more than, more than the average playtime because they're playing more. Okay. We're talking about this that's 50 percentile, probably to 30 percentile. They have time, but they don't have time. It's like these people need to be given a structure of players around them that have like mindsets. Okay. And the question, I think Archon in this is stepping in the right direction for that. However, I think on face value, this will be taken the same thing as eye level. Okay. And people will say, oh, purple parse over a blue parse, easy choice, you know? Um, but I think that reading between the lines, like I said, I think just the fact that I can see your parses and the fact you've put at least, because if you have 20, if you have, if it's week 4 or week 5 and and I can see your parses and then somebody else doesn't, I'm going to take the person that has the parse in general. Or what I'll do is I'll do the old fashioned way. I'll just pull up logs. I'll look at their logs and do it anyway. So which is it? Do we want to make it convenient? Which I believe we should make it convenient. I think this information should be, if this information should be easily accessible, which it is, you know, and also well known to players, because some players just won't care, and then other players will, you know. So, and even I won't care for a lot of it. But if I'm doing an alt, say I'm running a 10 and I know I only have time for 110, okay? I don't necessarily have to time the 10, but it better be a completed 10. I do have something on this note that I believe would be very, very advantageous to the game. And I think that when you go up here to the group finder and you can start a group here, okay, and then you can go here to the goal completion, I believe I think two things need to happen. I think if you hit this completion tab, okay, I think when you join this tab, that something comes up on when you join a completion group versus a standard or beat timer group, that there is a kind of like a social contract with that person, okay? And I think when you do a completion, like doing a completion 10 or whatever, that you are there for the long haul, or maybe at least like an hour, you know, because most dungeons take about 35 minutes to 40 minutes. Okay. So to add 20 minutes to that to be a completion dungeon, and after that hour, maybe you can leave, whatever. Or maybe it goes to a vote for completion dungeons that, hey, 3 of the 4 people want to go, or 3 of the 5 people want to go, and you can go. You can break that contract. But I think there needs to be severe penalties, I think, if this is clicked, okay, for people leaving groups once the incident has started, everything like that. So I think what this will do is, I think you'll see a lot of people do this. I think if there was actually like consequences to their actions, because we see this a lot in like MOBAs and things like that people will just leave groups and see, and there they have a ladder system like MMR system like Dota 2. And so what happens if they leave a group? Well, they just sacrifice their 50 MMR or 100 MMR or whatever scaling factor they have per game. It changes all the time because it's a flex system sometimes. So, and we see the same thing with Elo, with chess as well. So, and so we kind of flow into this this situation of, well, how do we stop that? Because last season they always get problematic, people leaving keys, and it's okay to some extent, but there's some of it during the beginnings that people are like, nope, not going to happen. And I totally understand that, but I think if we had a little social contract going on, to where we know if we do this, the goal is completion, that you are linked in there for this, and I don't know what the punishment would be. I don't know what you would take from them. Maybe it's a gold ante. Maybe you just say, to run a completion, you have to put 50,000 gold on the table. If you leave, that 50,000 gold goes to the other 4. Maybe we do that. Maybe it's like, to where, because in the end of the day, 40,000, it's not gonna be much. Maybe we, there has to be some way to hold these people accountable, because what they're actually doing is they're giving bad gameplay experiences to people. And I understand that's part of it, that the good with the bad, and you have to have good experiences to, and the bad experiences make the good better, the low lows and the high highs. I get that. But there has to be a way for us to have this, and then, and I also understand that emergencies happen, real life happens, I get it. But then if you're worried about that, then you can just do the other normal, you can do the beat timer standard, where they don't have as big penalties. But I think if you're there for the long haul, I think having a really good like a completion setting on, state your goal, state what you want. Like the whole goal to run this 10 was to get a mythic track, a myth track item in my vault. There was no other reason to run it, and if I knew that this person would pull the first boss and leave, I would have never done it. And so I think we have to overcome that. I think it's a huge pain point in the Mythic Plus system. So anyway, that's where I think it is. I think the Raider IO system was a very simplistic, objective system that tried to do this, push it in the SEP direction. Archon is going to be something further in that, but you're going to have to read between the lines because it is a little more statistic heavy. But I have a feeling that most people would take it just as the Raider IO. The question is we have to think about what information do we actually want to give players to be able to give good have good outcomes, positive outcomes out of this stuff. Because what does solve this is that we're able to get groups together, so where the person that doesn't have a lot of time can still have a positive experience on the 2 hours they can play that week. you know um we you know we necessarily can't do it. So I think that this Archon add-on is a step in the right direction. I think it needs to be funneled and focused in on, and it may just be time spent on the character during patch. I think that might just be the saving grace to this. Um, so yeah. So and if you can kind of get a general sense of this anyway. If you're looking at logs before you even walk in there, and you see a full row that this person's run every single Mythic Plus 10+ times, they've put in the work. It's every time they've run one of those, there's 8, so that's 80 dungeons times 30 minutes. That's your 40 hours right there. That tells me this person, regardless of whether they parse green, blue, or purple, at least they put the work in. At least they're trying. you know and so I think we get to that point. I think we're at that level of this game to where people expect that a little bit, and what they don't want is the weekend warrior, call them what they are, the people that log in once a week, okay, or just for a raid, and then do 1 or 2 Mythic Plus after that. They're in a different category of player. Okay, we need to distinguish the difference between their law and allowing a middle ground to be able to work your way up to that. Okay, but what I do not see is you spending the same amount of time down here and expecting this. I just don't see it. I don't see that ever happening. I think that's bad in every course of life. Okay, it just doesn't happen. You know. So anyway, that's my opinion about this Archon thing. I think it's a positive thing. I think the more you understand about statistics and how they can be skewed, we'll also see this. I think it's a step in the right direction to ask the questions correctly to Blizzard, to let them know what the player base wants and expects, for us to be able to make these decisions on the fly with not having to look up, a bunch of things. So I don't have to have 3 monitors on my desk, you know, which, there's nothing wrong with having 3 monitors on your desk. But a lot of people play this game on a laptop. They don't have the second monitor to have this. So having an in-game add-on to this really helps them, because, a lot of people play this at high level, and, on laptops. It happens. And so not everybody has that full PC setup. So anyway, this is the first part series, basically on this. So I'm going to move on to a different subject after I